Welcome to The Celebration, a place for leadership, inclusion, and expression. Let's snap it up for living the best version of ourselves. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Tom Earl. I am joined by the infamous, the amazing, my brother, Dennis Amadeus. How you doing, Dennis?
Doing phenomenal, Tom. High spirits,
What'd
blessed
you
and
say?
highly favored, man.
That's what's up. That's what's up. So we are very pleased to have you join us for this month's expression session. Dennis is going to be our feature for the live and online open mic. So Dennis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Dennis Amadeus. I'm a spoken word artist. I live in Tampa Bay, come by way of New York, born in Germany originally. I'm not an American citizen, but I still love all the people that I've met and consider family now. And yeah, man, I do graphic design work on the side, community organizing as much as I can. But my big thing that I really pride myself on and really enjoy doing is working with young people, specifically in quote unquote at risk predicaments or situations, and helping using the power of poetry to help them find themselves and express themselves and kind of work through some of the issues that other people don't seem to have time or knowledge or care about working through.
That's amazing. That's very inspiring. And I just looked at the date just to make sure. And Dennis is going to be our feature for the live and online open mic. It's going to be on November 20th. We'll be live. So Dennis, tell me about, those were a lot of passions that you have. What was your journey to, you said, and most importantly, using spoken word to work with young people? What was your journey to that?
Oh man. It's interesting, man. I came to Florida. I was kind of chasing my ex-girlfriend at the time, to be honest. I came to Florida from New York. I went to school for graphic design originally, and I had gone to school for 3 years. Things ended up not working out with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and but things didn't work out with the school either. I went to what I would consider a predatory private school that was very high, very expensive. And I didn't have the loan money to finish my last year, even though I was never informed of how much I actually had in the beginning when I was signing these loans and stuff like that. So that kind of left me in a real bad position, considering that I was in Florida by myself, no family, no anything like that. And then my only connection had gone back to New York. So it was really just not to make this overdrawn or long, it was really just meeting somebody on the bus, and I'd always been poetry has always been something that came very naturally to me, even when I was younger. If I didn't do so well, or I didn't do my best in classes in school, in high school or middle school, but when poetry came around, I was A+ student. You know what I mean? That was a few times in my life when I felt like I was the best in the class, and so I guess I met somebody on a bus, and he had an open mic, and I started going with him to open mic. And then the owner of the venue of the open mic was like, "Hey, you guys are pretty good. I have another open mic the next day, and people actually come to that one because the one we were going to, there was nobody ever there." So I went to the next open mic. I had just read some poetry off of a page that I had written literally for creative writing class at the graphic design school. And then somebody had come up and was like, "Hey, you should do poetry slam. Do you know what that is?" And I didn't, but he said you could win money. So at that time I didn't have no money, and I was like, all right, let me go try this. And sure enough, I was up against, actually, there was a poet. I don't know if you ever heard of him. His name's Tom Earl. There too. My first time. So I ended up tying with him for first place. But it wasn't just winning and getting the money. It opened the door to this community and this way of thinking and this, consciousness, enlightenment, this love. And I was blown over that something like that even existed. And I was bought in all the way. And then from that point on, it was just nonstop doors opening up, and working real hard to make sure that I perfected my craft and my performance. And one things lead to another. Now I'm 5 years in. I work with great organizations that work with young people in these bad circumstances. They believe in me. They believe in what I do. I've been very successful at what I do. And I'm just, like I said, I'm just very honored and blessed to even be where I am today, because I can literally say that it was all because of poetry, you know, and finding the spoken word community in Tampa that I did, that led me to where I'm at today.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That was, and we also tied with Spoken Heart. It was the three of us.
Yeah, that was the other one. Shout out to Spoken.
That's wonderful. Well, I think for folks who are wondering, okay, well, what's slam poetry? What's spoken word? Although I'd be surprised if by this point you haven't heard one of my podcasts. But why don't you share one of your poems with us, just so we can kind of get like a feel for you and people can see, why I have so much love and respect for you.
Yeah, man. I'll do this. This first poem, it actually kind of details some of my story, you know. So these days, it's rare for the average person to exist on this earth for all 80 of their years and come to an understanding of what their purpose is. So how blessed I must be to have been able to find mine in this. They say opportunity typically comes to your front door. And I can hear it knocking through my throat every time I perform, but it seems like no matter how hard I try and outstretch my arms to answer it, I can never get past these bars. In this track and field life, the biggest hurdle that I continuously have to jump is the background check. And I seem to trip every time. Sometimes it's just a stumble, but sometimes it's a full-on face-busting free fall that leaves a mark on my soul bigger than the ones on my record books. I've been denied for jobs, teaching positions, mentorship opportunities, and from just doing poetry in the classroom. True story. One time, a principal actually called the sheriff to come escort me out of his school. And his words to me were, "I would be a fool if I let anybody talk to my kids with a record like you." And it was at that moment I discovered the best way to defeat somebody. Take away their God-given worth. Brand them a troublemaker and take away their work. And if their worth is measured in how they work with kids, then it's not hard to understand how that brand made me feel worthless, purposeless. So I had to start to redefine for myself what purpose really is. See, eventually, I came to the understanding that purpose is something that God gives. And since anything God gives isn't something man can take away, then God must also create the conditions that make it seem that way. So if I feel these weights getting heavy on me during this race, it's not because I'm simply meant to feel the pain of disaster. No, it's because maybe he needs me to be stronger rather than faster. Because my power will directly come from everything that I've toppled that they use to try and break me. Each one of these tripped up hurdles is just a lesson, a reminder to myself to never settle for second, because those that need me need more than just another second-rate teacher. They need an educational weapon. But I can't counsel kids because they claim I clash with cops. Meanwhile, corrupted, coked-up controllers cancel creative classes round the clock, shun the reading, get rid of the outreach, build their schools on top of cash, and label me unfit to teach, when I should know that poetry is something every child branded at risk needs, because I understand what it's like to be viewed as something you yourself can't see. They ran some checks into their backgrounds and labeled them at risk of what? At risk of becoming like me? But if that's the truth, then they're just at risk of becoming free. At risk of learning through strife, changing their life, and redefining what the label at risk means. The point I'm trying to make is that this is all a test, a way to prove to God that I am worthy of his best, a divine background check to balance my wants and haves, because I want to be able to proudly carry the label teacher. I want to be a positive educational force for my nieces. I want to know I'm working every single day around kids, and I want to know I'm changing the way our future lives. So I have to study daily. I have to write a lot. I have to become one of the best poets of my lot. Because of the dumb thing this young kid did, I have to keep proving myself until you all will listen in. Because in a land where a background check is the standard used to determine your worth, even a poet has to make his actions louder than his words. Thank you.
Hey! Oh man, that was mad powerful.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.
And earlier when you did like the scare quotes around at-risk youth, I was like, oh, note to self, ask why you put the scare quotes. But then you got a chance to articulate it in the poem,
Yeah, I don't like, the thing is, with that, it's like I don't like that phrasing, but I don't know what else to say for people to understand the demographic that I want to work with, So it's kind of like this weird place to be. I could create a new term, but then everybody's gonna be like, what are you talking about,
A lot of people now were using the phrase underserved.
Underserved. I do
Because
like
that
that
puts the burden of responsibility on the fact that there's a systemic problem, a systemic setup around why young people, have the circumstances surrounding them. So.
Right.
You know what's funny is two of your stories I've been in now.
Yep. You were there when that dude came and got me with the sheriff's office. Yeah,
I
man.
do. I remember kind of like not necessarily sneaking you in, but sort of sneaking you in. And then you did like your most controversial poem. Like, I don't care if I'm a martyr. And like, I was like, here we go.
Yeah.
And then we went to the mosque afterwards.
Oh, we did. That was an awesome time.
Yeah.
That was a great time.
It was Friday. It was Juma.
Yep.
So what does it feel like when so you got all that weight on your shoulders, right? And then you write and perform a poem like this. Does it feel like the weight goes away? Is there like, does it feel cathartic? Explain to me, what it feels like.
I think for one, in the beginning, when I wrote that poem and performed it, I was in a different place than I am now. Because I've kind of proven myself, and a lot of people who have some clout in the community have seen that I'm actually worth my salt. It's a little bit easier for me to get into some of these spaces. But at the time, man, it was out of frustration, and I was like, I didn't want to give up, and that's why I wanted to make sure that I wrote that poem with a triumphant end. Because I believe in writing things and speaking things into existence. And I think that poem really helped me do that. So it was definitely cathartic in the beginning. And now I use it as a way to inspire and show other people that, you can do what you want. I feel like my whole life is a testimony to, there's something in the Bible that says, there's nothing that God has made for you that man can stop. You know what I mean? And I think my life is a constant testimony to that, because I feel like I've done everything in my power to try and mess up my purpose. But once I got in line with it, and I started actually moving towards it in a righteous way, everything opened up, man. And I always found a way through or in, or if I was blocked off or denied for something, it was something that wasn't going to be good for me in the first place. So, now it's more of a testimony than it is cathartic, but it was at the time very much so.
That's inspiring. That line you read from the Bible, and the story you shared reminds me of people like Al-Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz, or also known as Malcolm X. Or like Malcolm, any of us who can relate to that it's true. Like, I tried so hard to mess my life up, but there was a bigger plan for me.
Exactly, man. It's beautiful.
It sounds like your faith is a big inspiration in your writing and your life. You want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, my faith is it's the one thing that I know that I can lean on, and that is constant. I feel like, and it's the one thing that I can't tell other people about. Well, I could tell them, but it won't carry the weight of my experiences and what I feel in it, and that's why I also believe so strongly in faith being an individual walk. I don't necessarily, and I know people will disagree with me and have real strong opinions in the other direction, but I don't think we should be out here trying to convert people or to get people to follow one way or something like that. I think we need to live what we know to be godly, or what we have come to believe is godly, in our actions and the way we relate to the people in the world around us, and show people what God is, and not try and tell people or convert people or box or even box God in. It feels like we try to box and dictate what God has for people. But outside of that was sidebar. My faith is just, it's the one thing I can consistently always lean on. And, my prayers are always consistently, it's not for things, but it's for my purpose to shine through, even through my human faults, even through my ego, even through my lusts, even through my addictions and desires. Like, I still want my purpose to be fulfilled, and it's because of that, I see the life around me manifest, and I can't ever deny that. I can never, no matter what people say or what theories or anything like that other people have, I can't deny the power that it has in my life, and the influence that God has on me.
That's powerful. And it reminds me of a little poem we have.
Yes.
Too bad we don't got it still memorized. We could do it right now for people.
That's true. We should have probably memorized that, huh?
Yeah. We did it one time.
Yeah.
So
we'll get it again.
I know
coming soon.
Yes, exactly. Stay tuned. Maybe even at the open mic, you'll get to hear it.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
Talk to me about, I also know that you identify as a feminist. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I identify as a feminist in the concept, because again, I feel like almost religion, people want to kind of structure and put a box around words and stuff like that. So I identify the feminist in the context of equality, for women, and that also means equality in their choices, and men always get to make all the decisions in their lives, but it's like women always have their lives dictated by either the men in their lives or by societal standards that help them, or not help them, but have them, thinking less of themselves if they're not certain ways or certain things. And I'm against that wholeheartedly. I don't think there's anything wrong if a woman decides to play into that, societal role. And that's their choice, and that's who they want to be. But I don't believe in, negating the other side, or saying that other people who don't fit in that role, who don't want to pursue that, or women, are less than or worse. And I think that's very damaging to our, young people. I think it creates this weird dynamic of like men have this kind of weird pressure to rule and run everything. And then if they fail in that, they're seen as feminine, as if feminine is negative. And, it creates and I can go on forever and ever, man. It creates all kinds of, messed up, mentalities about ourselves, and then we start acting out on these things against our better judgment inside, because we want to fit into these standards, and we want to fit into these models that we are told is the right way.
I 100% agree. Do you have a poem that sort of talks about this that you'd like to share with us?
Would you like me to do it?
Yeah, why don't you share your poem with us? It's very powerful.
All right. So this is a poem. Typically I would do it in an audience. So, to anybody listening, imagine if I'm on the stage and you're in the audience, and I'm saying this to a lot of people. But yeah. Fellas, raise your hand if you've ever done any of the following. Measured your penis with a ruler. Timed your masturbation to see exactly how long you could last. If you ever brag to your friends about how you had 11 inches worth of sex with a girl for 3 hours just to hide the fact that you were a virgin. Raise your hand if you ever slapped box with your elders, even though you knew you didn't stand a chance. Raise your hand if you never told anybody that you might have dislocated your jaw that day. But hey, boys will be boys, right? Raise your hand if you've ever been bullied. If you ever took a stand to that bully, and make sure you raise the fist that you taught him the lesson with, if the kids that you eventually bullied ever got to teach that same class. If you intentionally started that fight, even though everything inside of you was screaming, don't do it, but you knew that if you didn't throw that punch, everybody would call you pussy. Raise your hand if the last thing in the entire world you ever want to be is pussy. Because pussy is the furthest thing from being a man, and you'll be damned if you ain't a man. Raise your hand if you ever bragged to your friends about how you took your first time in jail like a G. All to the soundtrack of my mother's sobs. They asked me if it bothered me that she was so disappointed in her son. I told them no, because she raised a son. Boys will be boys. And she was just doing what women do best. But us men, we don't cry. We swell with phallic pride so our spines can stay erect. Our heads can stand tall. Never are we soft. Don't let your sensitivity show at all, lest you be mistaken for a pussy. The furthest thing from a man you could ever be, even though inside one is the closest you can ever come. But I'll be damned if I ain't a man. It's been like this since the tribals. I'll be damned if I ain't a man. Can't you see all my rivals? I'll be damned if I ain't the man that continues this cycle. I'll be damned if I ain't a man. It even says so in the Bible. Raise your hand if you are tired of forcing yourself into a gender box socially constructed by violence. Raise your hand if you have ever wanted to raise your fists for something more than just bludgeoning people with. Raise your hand if you're willing to raise your hand right now for change. For a definition of being a man that doesn't involve having to take it from somebody else or having to swallow all your pain. Raise your fists for taking responsibility for your actions. Raise your fists for claiming your kids and being there to raise them. Raise your fists if you know how to love unconditionally, with patience and kindness, without pride or boasting or dishonoring others. And then you can tell me how boys will be boys. Thank you.
Yes. Oh man, that poem gives me like shivers, and every time I've only actually got to hear it like 2 times live now, and every time it's just feels like one of those poems where you're like, this should be part of like the curriculum in schools. You know, like now listen to this poem. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I feel you. I appreciate that, man. That means a lot, man. I'm honored that you'd say that.
Where does a poem like that come from?
Um, when I was younger, that word was my trigger word. You could literally almost get me to do anything by calling me that. You know what I'm saying? And I would have to do everything in my power to prove that that's not who I was. You know, and and it put me in a lot of bad places, you know. Like I said in the poem, it was my first time I went to jail was based on this kind of idea. I got in a fight with this kid for something that had nothing to do with me. Literally, it was one of my friends and his girlfriend. They had an issue with this kid, and then I went down to the school and I beat the kid up, and I ended up hurting him real bad, and I ended up having to go to jail. And now the first time I've ever been arrested, and and it didn't end there though. You know, that was almost like a badge of honor. Now, I had some street cred now because I went to jail, and for beating somebody up, and that's the problem, right? Is because I was picked on a lot when I was younger, and then once I started fighting and hurting people and creating trauma to others, all of a sudden the narrative shifted for Dennis. Now I was to be respected, and you better watch out for him. He's tough, and people treated me in a whole nother way, man. And when you get positively reinforced for doing these things, you don't ever want to stop. You know what I'm saying? You don't ever want to lose that. And it was just so ingrained in me, and it slowly just destroyed my I want to say, I don't know what you would call it, but it just, first it got me arrested, then it got me expelled from school, then it got me arrested again, and I had to, I was on probation again for longer, you know what I mean? Then it got me kicked out of college, and my first college, and, and it just goes worse and worse and worse, and next thing you know, you're in a jail cell and you're around people who you really are not like them. You know what I'm saying? And now you get to really see what it's like when you're around violent people or you know what I mean? And not to shame people like that either, because everybody is typically a product of their environment. But that was my wake up call, was when I was laying in a hospital bed with a knife wound, you know what I'm saying? A punctured lung, a broken rib, calling my mother in the same room that my brother died and telling her that her last son is in a hospital bed, you know what I'm saying? And that's where that all leads to, man. And yeah, you get all that street cred, but there's no righteousness, there's no fulfillment, there's nothing, besides emptiness and pain at the end of the road.
That's a powerful story. I appreciate you sharing that with us, Dennis.
No, anytime, man.
For me though, what'd you say?
I said I appreciate you listening and putting me on here.
My pleasure. I think for me, the thing that I'd like to hear too is, how do you go from where you were saying like people could control you just by saying a certain word, where it just set you off, to like being able to name and voice like exactly what was happening, like to be able to say, oh, well, that was because I grew up in a society of patriarchy and all this. Like, how did you get that self-awareness to be able to like say this is actually what was going on, and to start to change the way, you know what I'm saying?
No, I know exactly what you mean. First things first is you have to listen, I think. And you have to read, I guess. These aren't things that you're going to learn about in schools, like you said. These aren't things, you have to kind of you have to listen to people who have been through this, and you have to listen to, the other side. You have to listen to, women and their struggles. And then you start thinking about how did I perpetuate these things onto women, or how did I perpetuate these things onto other people? You know what I mean? And then you have to do that self-assessment. And I think that's the one thing people lack, is nobody wants to look inside themselves and see where the monster lies inside themselves. They want to keep fighting this on the outside because that's safe. You know what I mean? You can point your finger at something else and say that's bad, but it's hard to be like, I was bad or I'm evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I hear you. So right now I feel like this is like a blueprint for how anybody can go and get self-awareness. But I'm
Oh
curious
yeah.
to know, like, specifically you, like, how
Okay,
did,
okay, yeah. No,
what was
okay. So
like,
for me, I think what really was the thing for me was when I was going really hard research learning about poor Black communities, things that kind of plague communities of color, as far as violence and things like this. And I was always wondering, I was like, what makes these young people so quick to violence, right? And then that's when I made the connection. Well, what made me so quick to violence, And then and for me, it was social status. It wasn't like, I didn't grow up by any means rich or, I had a lot of poverty struggles myself, but I also had a good home environment in the sense of community around me, right? That wouldn't let me starve to death, or they wouldn't let me, anything like that. So for me, it was putting two and two together where it's like, man, I'm starting to see what I perpetuated onto others in these young kids, right? And thinking, again, taking that self-assessment and really thinking what caused me to do that, And it was this realization of like, man, what plagues, I think, poor communities of color almost more or not or equally as much as like, historical white supremacy or lack of education, these kind of things, is a hypermasculinity. When you have nothing else to define yourself with, you don't have money, or you don't have status, or you don't have the ability to provide for a family, but you still want to be a man. What's the only thing that's left is the idea of violence, asserting yourself, dominance, because you don't have to pay for that. You could just be that, you act that out. So that was kind of the correlation that I made. And that's why I wrote that poem, was specifically for these young people, where it's like, you want to prove yourself so much, but who are you proving yourself to, and what are you proving yourself for? You know what I mean? And so that was kind of where that comes from. And then being able to put that in my own flesh and skin was very eye-opening and revealing to me. Writing that poem helped me continue that thought process that got me to even further things down the line, like hypermasculinity being such a huge issue. And it's not talked about because, again, it's praised. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
It's praised. Or like, you have to be that way.
Yeah, that's powerful. I know for me, one of the first places I've heard that talked about was Byron Hurt's Beyond Hip Hop and Beats, where he talks about that. And for me, also the Anytown and Community Tampa Bay.
Oh, yes.
That was powerful for me, really, to see like diverse groups of people coming together and talking about these things. And you hear, like you were saying, like, oh, that's what it's like when I do this, or like, oh man, like where you were saying, imagine if people were raising their hand to see like a room full of dudes be like me, and you're like, wow, okay, so then why do we choose to participate in this box?
Right. No, that's absolutely, yeah, I'm actually sorry, I forgot to mention that. That was a huge, that Anytown workshop, which is actually what the poem is based on, probably what I should have started, where it was, I think I talked, yeah, that's not like a one that we can't talk about. So the Anytown workshop is like, they line up all the male or all the women, and those who identify as men on the other side, and they run through these questions, right? And the questions are like, stand up if you ever have done anything, and like, stand up if you ever talked to your friends in a negative way about women, stand up if you've ever been stabbed, or if you've ever been a part of physical violence, stand up if you've ever been told not to cry, stand up if you've ever been physically abused because people thought you were acting feminine. And I found myself standing up for every single one, right?
Mm.
And then that's not what really hit me, though. What really hit me was when they switched it now, and when it was for the women's turn, they ask them questions that are on the other side of the spectrum, and you start realizing how much trauma you have caused throughout your life to other people by following this hypermasculinity code. And that's what hit me, was like, man, and that guilt to this day sits with me. It's like, I hurt a lot of people trying to be like that, and I don't just mean the people I physically beat up. You know what I mean? I mean the women that I've silenced, the women that would have had a great case for sexual assault or rape against me. You know what I'm saying? And it's just, the list goes on and on. And again, these are things that are almost praised at a time. Like, good job. You did that. Yeah, man. You got that. Right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree. That's one of my biggest regrets in life is the things I did when I was buying into this system of masculinity. And like my biggest wish in life is that I had learned about intersectional feminism like as a little kid. You know what I mean? So Dennis, is there, we're kind of nearing our end, unfortunately, because I'm having such a good time with
oh
you.
man, sorry. I know I
No,
could be
no
long
need to.
winded.
But this has been fun. Like that's what happens when like two friends who like love each other get together. Is we just like it just pours out. You're like, what? Where'd the time go? It's not fair, you know.
Right.
Is there another poem you wanted to share with us before we sign off?
Yeah, man. Since we're on the topic about kind of, going through our life and this, categorizing where we've kind of gone wrong and our triumphs over that. This is a poem I just recently finished. It was very vulnerable for me to write this poem. But it's about the identity of race and what that's like walking through, I guess, in my shoes. So when I was in high school, all I wanted to be was black. Every morning sunrise greeted me with a cream of wheat man's smile, and my mirror greeted me with a bowl full of self-hate, the same color of cream of wheat. How can a black man make this? How can I make this a black man? I woke up and began putting on the dressing of what I thought was supposed to be black culture, not the one I actually lived in, but the one I wanted to. The one I watched on BET every afternoon. I had to be like that. Then maybe they could finally see. Adopting the black look the same way my black family adopted me, so there I stood, in front of the mirror, making sure my pants were baggy enough. My very, very tall tee was past my knees. Will they be able to see the dirt on these Nikes? God, I hope not. Black people have the cleanest sneakers. I wanted to stick out. In a school that had a 5% minority population, and boy, did I stick out like a sore history of racism. The things heard from people who didn't know I was mixed. What are they saying? Niggers, pull your pants up? And this ball is the nigger ball. You drink twice as much beer. Put on that ass shaking, booty bouncing nigger music. After a fight I started in a basketball game, the person I punched screamed out, "That's why you don't let niggers on the court." I remember feeling a sense of pride. And therein lies the true danger. Wanting to feel the suffering that most blacks have been fighting to escape for centuries. As shallow as my idea of what it meant to be black was, my privilege runs equally as deep. Like being allowed in schools even though I have an extensive criminal record. My privilege runs deep, like how that 1 second it takes for somebody to have to think about my race pushes me 1 second away from getting killed for it. I live on the fault line that divides this country. I have felt the venom spewed when people think there are no black people around. I have suffered for fighting what many wouldn't consider my fight. I've seen the disparity of how every single person of color that I fought was a slap on the wrist. But fighting a white kid came with cuffs and arrest, expulsion from school, removal from my classes, the basketball team, my senior year, my first year of probation, and the $900 of restitution at 17. No matter how violent their use of the N-word was, I made sure their punishment was always more severe. When I was pepper sprayed by police, after having my hands cuffed, after I was subdued, I didn't know if it was my rhetoric or my voice that bothered them most. The snap realization of, wait, he's not white? The frustration of not even knowing anymore. That even if I'm 100% sure of my identity, it's still only 50% of how I'm affected by it. That no matter how firm my individual ground, the moment I step outside of my home, I'm inching out onto a mountain of uncertainty. Each step coming with an avalanche of biases different than the last. My basketball buddies call me white chocolate. My mentors tell me I'm a positive example for struggling young black men. My neighborhood still sees me as the white outsider. My fellow poets include me in all of their black lines. Black lives matter. Black on black crime. Black on black rhyme. I've always wondered, what is my place in these movements? If I somehow made a big wave, should it be my face in these movements? Is your father black? Then nigga, you black. The love of my life calls me a beautiful black man. Now here I stand, in front of the mirror, in love with what I see, embarrassed by that 17-year-old reflection. But as wrong as he was, a part of him was still right. My blackness has always shined brightest in who I really am, but it will always still be filtered through white skin. My blackness shouldn't be measured in the fact that I will probably never watch 12 Years a Slave, nor in the fact that I knew every episode of Luke Cage was named after Gangstar songs before the internet did. My blackness shouldn't be measured at all. Or should it? And therein lies the scariest thing. 29 years in, and I still don't even know. Thank you.
Yes. Man, I feel like the power of your poems is in like how you're able to share your self-awareness and your personal journey of self-reflection and just be totally vulnerable in naming it in your poems, you know, like much appreciation to you, brother. Appreciate that so much.
No, I appreciate you, man. I learned from great poets, man. You know, you were always somebody who checked me, you know what I mean, when I was still learning, when I was still growing. But you're also somebody who loved me through everything, man. And you know, not just you, but so many people and so much in my community are a reason of why I am who I am, you know. And that's why I love this poetry community. So I love this poetry thing, and I'm just very grateful that I could ever even have found it or be a part of it.
That's beautiful. And I think that's the perfect way for us to finish today. I can't wait till, you know, like that, you said it's a new poem. I can't wait till you start sharing it and the conversations and dialogue and impact it's going to have on our community. So much appreciation to you again. And as a reminder, Dennis Amadeus is our feature for the live and online open mic on November 20th. It's going to be at noon if you're on the West Coast, 2 p.m. if you're in Central Time, 3 p.m. if you're on the East Coast, and 8 p.m. if you're in Nigeria, 8 p.m. if you're in London. So those are all the places I got people I love, so I make sure I shout it out. It's going to be live. It's a place, it's a writing workshop. It's like a love fest. We have a really good time. And then there's going to be an open mic part and a featured performance by our man, Dennis Amadeus. So thank you so much once again, Dennis. Where can people reach you? How can people get at you and share their love with you?
I'm very blessed to have a very unique name. So just Dennis Amadeus on all the social media channels. And I typically pop right up. I have some poems on YouTube under Dennis Amadeus. That's Amadeus, Dennis, Dennis. And yeah, man, the poems on YouTube, disclaimer, are older poems. So they're not necessarily where I am now, but I'm working right now on getting myself more professional. Soon I'll have a website up and an official YouTube page and stuff like that. So
wonderful. So right now, just go to Facebook and type your name in, Dennis Amadeus.
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, the whole nine.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much, Dennis. And as always, you know where to find me, at Tom Earl Artist. My favorites are Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, especially like Instagram stories. So it's been, it's a nice feature. So it's been a pleasure and a joy. Any last minute thoughts you want to share before you sign off?
Nah, man, just, you know, thank you for having me here. You know, I love you. I love anybody who's listening to this right now. Even if I don't know you, I love you because you're a human being that's breathing on this earth. And as long as you're breathing on this earth, then you have the ability to change it and make positive impacts. So, you know, do you.
We love you. We love you. So thank you, Dennis. And thank you, as Dennis said, I want to echo that for everybody for listening. We appreciate you. Please let us know your thoughts. Put it in the comments below or message us. You can also email me, tom@tomearl.com. We look forward to having you join us on November 20th. If you want to register for that, it's tomearl.com/events. So thank you very much, everybody. Peace and blessings.
Peace.